Hello. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes. Yes.
Hi there.
Yes. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you to this significant webinar hosted by the Arab Organization for Human Rights in the UK. With the title, The Genocide Continues, Gaza Under Siege Despite the Ceasefire. This webinar is to examine the continental genocide being carried out by the Israeli occupation in the Gaza Strip despite the announcement of a ceasefire agreement. Since today we have so many honored guests, but some of them is short of time. I mean, maybe he wants to leave earlier. So we'll start right away, and without further ado, we start with Mr. Richard Barrett. Mr. Richard, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Nader, and thanks to the uh, Arab Human Rights Organization for holding this important webinar. Yes, I mean, I think it's vitally important that we cut through the really preposterous narrative that has emanated, particularly from Donald Trump, where even in the last few days, he's claiming to have brokered a peace agreement and ceasefire uh, in relation to Palestine and Israel, which he claims is, the first peace agreement in 3,000 years, and trying to claim credit for a so-called ceasefire. When in fact, and I'm sure other speakers will go through it, but I think it's very clear to anybody who's looking seriously at the situation that uh, there there is no real ceasefire. There's been something of a reduction in the level of massacres and atrocities being carried out by the Israeli forces, but we have an estimated 400 people have been killed since the announcement of the so-called ceasefire. Uh, uh, in excess of 1,000 people injured, and of course, daily military operations by the Israeli occupation forces, attacking buildings, attacking agencies trying to deliver aid, breaching the so-called yellow line, although issuing denials that they're doing so, and preventing the proper flow of aid into Gaza in a situation where there is a humanitarian catastrophe unfolding that is really difficult to comprehend. I mean, it's worth remembering that long before the commencement of the genocidal massacre that's happened over the last 2 or more years, from October 2023, that even before that, the United Nations were saying that Gaza was in a state of permanent humanitarian catastrophe. That was before all of this. And since then, obviously, about 90% of buildings, residential buildings, have either been damaged or completely destroyed. Virtually every part of the Gaza Health Service has been destroyed or very, very severely damaged. Water infrastructure, schools, third level education, third level institutions destroyed, an absolute leveling of the infrastructure necessary to sustain human existence in Gaza, and Israel continues to prevent the flow of aid that might allow some relief. And then we have the flooding and rains recently causing collapsing buildings, exacerbating an already disastrous situation for those displaced, living in overcrowded situations, living in tents. I don't. No words can describe the horror of the situation that persists in Gaza, and Israel clearly not intent in any serious way in pursuing any kind of just or reasonable peace, but just kind of carrying on their campaign at their genocidal campaign at a slightly lower level. And I suppose certainly a thing I've wanted to emphasize since the so-called ceasefire is that Trump tries to claim some sort of credit for this ceasefire, but in fact, he kind of gave the game away as to what really happened when he said that he had to, in advance of making that announcement, he was on the phone to Benjamin Netanyahu, and he said to Netanyahu, "We can't take on the whole world." And I think that was a sort of telling comment, because it was a sort of admission on his part that really what forced them to announce the ceasefire and to try and at least present the perception that there was a ceasefire was because, first of all, of the incredible resistance of the people of Gaza simply refusing to be ethnically cleansed, which of course is the point of the Israeli genocidal assault on Gaza was always about trying to ethnically cleanse Gaza, drive the Palestinians out of Gaza. But Palestinians, despite the horror that has been visited on them, the massacre that's been visited on them, simply refused to leave. They refused to be ethnically cleansed. And combined with that, you had a global uprising taking place across the world, which was discrediting the Israeli regime in front of the eyes of the world, and putting indeed pressure even on the Trump administration, to the point that even some of Trump's own Make America Great Again base were turning against him because it was simply not possible to sort of excuse or justify the genocidal horror that was being inflicted on the people of Gaza. So the so-called ceasefire, even though it's not a ceasefire, was, insofar as they felt the need to announce it and pretend there was a ceasefire, was because of the resistance of the Palestinians and because of a global uprising that was beginning to frighten leaders in the West who had armed and enabled and supported and provided political cover to the Israeli regime over many years, and indeed during the genocide itself. And I suppose what they are hoping is that what's the horror that's continuing in Gaza, the ongoing annexation now, new developments being proposed in East Jerusalem, the ongoing ethnic cleansing and the legal settlement of the West Bank and so on. They're just hoping that this will drop down the news agenda to the point where they will be under less pressure, and in other words, to maintain a perception that things have improved, that there's some sort of serious opportunity for peace, when in actuality, the campaign of genocidal sort of, the genocidal campaign against the Palestinians in Gaza continues, and the drive to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from historic Palestine continues. But we should, I think, take heart from the fact that hundreds of millions of people literally across the world have been educated and politicized by the horrors that we have all witnessed, that we have seen, live on television and on social media. And I think it will be very, very difficult for the Israeli regime to recover the ground in terms of the hearts and minds of hundreds of millions of people who've had their eyes open as to the real nature of the Israeli regime, of its apartheid character, of its character as a brutal occupying force, and as a regime that is bent on the genocidal destruction of the Palestinian people and intent on the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Palestine. I think despite the continued complicity of Western governments and leaders with this, there is now hundreds and hundreds of millions, probably billions of people across the world who have come on to the side of the Palestinians. And certainly I can say from in Ireland, I mean, we've always had a high level of solidarity with Palestine here in Ireland, but the extent of activism of people here demanding sanctions, putting pressure on the Irish government to impose sanctions, which the Irish government are still not doing in any serious way, but they're under a level of pressure they've never been. And I think that is true right across Europe. And I mean, others can talk about the United States, but certainly there has been a massive level of mobilization across the globe. And it's those forces, along with continued Palestinian resistance to the Israeli occupation, to the genocidal campaign Israel is waging, to the apartheid regime, that are the hope in this dark and bleak situation. Yeah, we have to continue to find ways to obviously expose the reality of what is continuing in Gaza, the genocidal horror continuing to go on in Gaza, but also to build the resistance in the Western world to a point where we can actually force real sanctions to be imposed by governments like my own and other governments, where we have seen, there's still a long way to go, don't get me wrong, and there's obviously resistance at the top levels of many EU countries to acknowledging the truth about the Israeli regime, but I think they're under a level of pressure they've not been before, and we have to continue to build that movement of popular pressure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barrett. And now we give the floor to Mr. Richard Falk, American professor, activist, and human rights defender. Mr. Falk, you have the floor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm very glad to be part of this panel discussion of the fake diplomacy that has shifted a lot of the media attention away from the abusive Israeli policies toward the people of occupied Palestine, and indeed toward Palestine in general. I think it's what Richard Barrett just said covers the overview of the situation in a way that I find very congenial and insightful, and without any discrepancy so far as my own understanding is concerned of the evolving situation. But it should be understood that, as he was suggesting, the people of Gaza are experiencing a somewhat lower level of aerial bombardment and artillery shelling, but they're in a state of being totally vulnerable, totally under these repeated provocative attacks by Israel that are completely negating the allegations made on behalf of the Trump diplomacy that this is a ceasefire and a path to peace. It's really not that. It's a path to the further fulfillment of the Zionist plans to erase Palestine. There's no evidence that they have qualified that essential dimension of the overall idea of finding a one-state solution based on Jewish supremacy within an Israel that's labeled as Greater Israel. And that's a code way of describing annexationist goals that are very much more salient than the alleged security motivations of Israel. Israel has clearly manifested a continuing expansionist view that seeks as much land as possible with as few Palestinians on it as possible. And although the level of military violence may have diminished to a degree, the natural conditions of winter in Gaza and indirectly the West Bank are more severe than they were during the period of unlimited genocide. Living in these encampments of very insufficient tents that are vulnerable to the winter cold and wind are resulting in daily deaths among the Palestinians and a sense of the failure of the international community, as represented particularly by the UN, to challenge this false path to peace and justice. And that's what it is. It's a deception that was shockingly, for me, resulting in a unanimous Security Council resolution and that endorsed the Trump approach and pretended that there really was a genuine process of peace rather than a diplomatic shift in combat tactics. That's what this diplomacy represents, a shift in combat tactics combined with a diplomatic offensive designed to reward the perpetrator of genocide and to punish the victim. And that's should be a source of shame on the part of the UN to let that happen. And it's a shock that for the first time since this horrifying spectacle started unfolding after October 7th, the Security Council has been able to act unanimously. It was the times where a genuine ceasefire, I think, was sought, was 5 times vetoed by the West, and particularly the US. And now we have a situation where on the one side, as Richard Barrett emphasized, Israel has become a pariah state for the peoples of the world. It is being rewarded by the institutions that are supposedly the custodians of law and justice in the world. And that produces not only a deepening humanitarian crisis, but it's also a world order crisis when you have the UN siding with genocide or with the results of genocide. And it's as if after World War II, the surviving Nazis were put in control of the development of the future of Germany. That would have been an inconceivable result, but that's what's happening, or what the West and particularly the US are trying to have happen with respect to Israel and the region, which there's a intercivilizational dimension to this situation in which the alignments show that Israel was backed only by white Western countries. And the Palestinians were backed by the global South, and not inadequately, but nevertheless rhetorically, at least, by most of the Arab and Muslim majority countries. So one has this, what Huntington, after the Cold War, described as a clash of civilizations, also playing out in this terrible human tragedy that has been allowed to unfold in Gaza. And so, as never before, it's up to the peoples of the world in civil society activism to resist these developments and to express solidarity with the Palestinian people in their struggle for basic rights overall, and especially the right of self-determination. Let me close by pointing out that one of the features that is so disturbing in what is described as a peace process is that the Palestinians have been excluded totally from participating in shaping their own future. It's a complete repudiation of a victimized people that have been persecuted in their own homeland. And until that fundamental fact is recognized and acted upon, I think we're in a situation of dramatic free fall as far as shaping a peaceful and just and sustainable future, not only for the Palestinian people, but for the region as a whole. Let me stop there.
Thank you very much for your insightful comments. And now we move to Mr. Shaukat Adam, member of the UK Parliament. Mr. Adam. Mr. Adam, are you there?
I am, thank you. Sorry, I'm just coming from the chamber. Sorry for joining you a little bit late.
Thank you for being with us.
It's a real pleasure to be with you all. I'll speak very briefly on a couple of issues. Firstly is the position of the British government and the position of many parliamentarians, which is not reflective, I must say, of many of the public of our country. And that is a continuum of how we behaved since this present atrocity has begun, and the continuation through the massacre and the killing of countless innocent men and women and children, and now through the ceasefire, our governments have shown, in particularly the Labour government, with which we had more expectations of, I would say, that they have not stepped up at all. And it's just a continuum of supporting whatever Israel says. We have plenty of strong words. Every statement that we have, we are really upset, we are really disturbed by, we are really concerned with, but no tangible actions whatsoever. Nothing comes to fruition. And in my capacity, one of the most frustrating things I hear, you can imagine many frustrating things you can hear in British Parliament, but is when a minister says we are doing everything that we can. And then you ask, have you even brought in the ambassador for her her comments of if to have been made by anybody else, the first port of call would be to the government of that country. But no, we haven't even asked the ambassador to come in and explain her comments or explain the actions of the country that she represents. Are we going to seize any form of economic are we going to impose any economic, cultural, social sanctions? None whatsoever. And I remember once asking the then Foreign Secretary David Lammy if economic sanctions would be a consideration, considering that David Lammy has a very powerful story of slavery in his ancestry, and one that he brings to the chamber and to the dispatch box at many occasions. And he retorted and he replied back that it was simply too expensive to consider economic sanctions against Israel, at which point I did have to remind him that one of the factors that prolonged slavery was because it was simply too expensive to abandon. So we saw how with impunity Israel continued the constant barrage and the constant attack on the people of Palestine. It has unfortunately continued to do so since this so-called ceasefire, which to me is one side ceasing, but the other side continuing to fire. And we have seen countless deaths, etc. So unfortunately, I wish I could report that there has been better news. The only game in town was the American deal. They signed it along with the other Arab countries, and there has been no questions asked about the lack of aid going in, very rarely mentioned. There's been no questions about why the media is still not allowed in. And in the last 2 weeks, we have been afforded one urgent question on Gaza, and they felt that it was so unimportant that they combined it with the other most unimportant tragedy that's going on in the world, and which is Sudan. So we had one debate about Sudan and Gaza combined together for just over an hour, maybe 90 minutes. And that just signifies how important they think this is. And at the same time and through the same period, I may need to double check, but I think we've had three debates about the Chagos Islands. So they just wish to kick the can into the long grass down the road. It's over now. But many parliamentarians, thankfully, still continue to ask questions at every opportunity we have. So that's unfortunately the status quo. So nothing has really changed there. Second is the West Bank. And I'm certain people have already mentioned it, but the situation in the West Bank is absolutely atrocious. We're aware that over 1,000 people have been killed since the conflict began, and close to 400 have been wounded just since the last few months, including Italian and other Europeans who were visiting the West Bank. I visited the West Bank in Palestine earlier this year, and the images still haunt me to this day. The closing of whole towns of 40 to 50,000 people at an instant, with no explanation, with no reasoning for how long. I met people who had been removed from their refugee camps for the second time in Tulkarm, young men that had been attacked by dogs. It's just persistent and constant. Every aspect of the Palestinian life being attacked, whether it's their educational, whether it's their religious, with the incidents around Masjid al-Aqsa and the compound, whether there's cultural, their food, in fact, has already been taken over. So the haunting eyes of the people that I saw as I say, will live with me till my dying days. And the West Bank is something that we talk about, and I have raised questions, and there's people that submit EDMs in Parliament. So we're hoping to keep continuing putting pressure on that. But again, it's the same sort of responses we get. We're doing everything we can, but actually doing anything is another matter. And finally, we have also 7, if I'm not mistaken, hunger strikers who are in their 40+ days. One was rushed into hospital a couple of hours ago. I was at a press conference just about 3-4 hours ago with family members because the questions that have been raised regarding the hunger strikers. Unfortunately, Jeremy Corbyn, which many of you many of you I'm sure know of, asked the question. It was, I think, yesterday, and on the situation of the hunger strikers, and to our country and our parliamentarians' detriment, a few of them, burst out laughing. And it was a real sad moment, a really, really sad moment. Again, it's just a continuation of how we treated the people of Palestine. Now we are treating British citizens who stood up and addressed the issue. And in this country, you are innocent until you're proven guilty. Obviously, I can't say much more about the cases itself. But this and their cases now have been postponed till early part of next year, February, I believe. And it seems they're being neglected and forgotten and not spoken about in the media, just like they are trying to do with the Palestinian people. So the people of Gaza have lost their lives, their loved ones, their properties, their whole livelihood. In this country, we are losing our rights. There are now ongoing discussion of proscribing even the chant of the global intifada to make that an arrestable offence as well. So I will leave you, unfortunately, with those somber thoughts. I wish I could be a lot more positive. All I can say, there are many parliamentarians that will continue to fight, and the good people of this country will make sure that we do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adam. Thanks for your time, and thanks for insightful comments. And I just want to, Mr. Richard Boyd Barrett, sorry.
Yes.
Richard, Richard, we understand that you have other commitments today.
Yes.
To attend, but before you leave, I may ask you to, for a final word, to share with us, so that we can share a closing remark for just 1 minute, sharing the clear call to action for our audience.
Well, I mean, one effort to try and put forward where I think we have to go was a bill I brought into the Irish Parliament last week, which was a sanctions bill against Israel, which it was calling for completely breaking all economic, political, diplomatic relations with the state of Israel on the basis that the state is obliged actually to do it because of its obligations under the Genocide Convention, because all signatories to the Genocide Convention are obliged not just to try and punish people after the fact, but to deter the commission of genocide and to use all means at their disposal to do so. And also as signatories to the International Criminal Court as a government that purports to a state that purports to support international law and human rights, that we have obligations to impose sanctions on regimes guilty of apartheid, of ethnic cleansing, of denial of basic human and civil rights to the Palestinian people on an ongoing and systematic basis. And therefore that we need to do to the Israeli regime what was done to apartheid South Africa. In other words, completely isolated from the international community, economically, politically, and diplomatically, in order to end the occupation and to allow for the genuine self-determination of the people of Palestine. So that was a bill I brought forward, and I think that's where we have to go. And I do think, despite the continued complicity of governments including my own, who have, like others, paid lip service to the Palestinian issue, but don't actually act, or in many cases actually frustrate efforts to impose sanctions on Israel. But what is interesting is they feel the need to try and convey a perception that they are genuinely standing with the Palestinians. And that shows their weakness and their vulnerability to the popular movements and the civil society movements that Richard has talked about. I saw the Rabbi Weiss there, and I'm sure he'll speak, and I'm sorry I'm not around to hear him, but I think one enormous feature of the movement we've seen across the world is Jewish people speaking out against Zionism, which has also helped to sort of like expose the truth that the Israeli regime does not speak for Judaism, but is actually, simply a colonial project backed by the big Western powers. And I think, so that's where we have to go. And I do think, despite the horrors we're witnessing, we now have hundreds of millions more people who are the allies of the Palestinians in the struggle to achieve that. But we have to harness and organize that power to put pressure on governments that continue to be complicit with this genocidal regime. So that I think is our task. And as dark as the hour might seem, I do believe that there are forces that have been unleashed in response to the genocidal horror of the last 2 years that actually have the power to finally dismantle this horrific regime. But we have a job to do to organize and push forward those forces.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Barrett, and I apologize for keeping you that long. And now we move to Mr. Frank Romano, international human rights activist and member of the July 2025 the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, Hanzala. Sir Romano. Hello? Mr. Romano, are you there? Can you unmute, please?
Yeah, yes, thank you. I
you're
appreciate
welcome.
this,
Just
Mr.
you have the floor.
Omran. Yes, thank you very much. And I thank you all the speakers for being here to this very, very important discussion. And I will be as brief as I can. First of all, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu himself has said Israel won't stop the war until it destroys Hamas. And in spite of US attempts to sugarcoat that, the truth is clear. Netanyahu does not want to end the war and does not intend to leave Gaza unless forced to do so. Netanyahu helped the Americans to draft the ceasefire we're talking about here. The proposal he had no intention of completely honoring, as indicated by countless violations. That conforms to a systematic Israeli strategy of violating ceasefires, such as the one with Lebanon and others. Why? That's the important question. Let's just first take a very quick look at the ceasefire deal. The ceasefire deal of the 15th of January expected to follow the 3 stages. The first stage was, of course, the hostage exchange phase, more or less achieved. It was agreed, however, that 600 trucks of humanitarian aid would enter Gaza daily, including 50 fuel trucks. We're going to address whether that has been complied with or not. It also allowed the displaced Palestinians to reach their homes and start to make a phased withdrawal from Gaza. Israel, however, would remain in control of about 58% of Gaza, withdrawing behind the so-called yellow line. The second stage, Israel was to accept a permanent ceasefire and further exchange of hostages. Third stage, the remains of deceased Israeli hostages would be released and reconstruction of Gaza would commence. What about now the violations of Israel? Let's look at the attacks. The the October 10th ceasefire agreement. Israel has violated the agreement at least 738 times, killing at least, or at least we said 400, like there are more Palestinians and wounding another 1,000. So some people have said as much as almost 400. Israel currently occupies more than half of the Gaza Strip and continues to target Palestinians in other areas outside its control, according to the deal. Now, what about humanitarian aid that the other speakers have definitely alluded to? Before October 7th attack, 500 aid trucks entered Gaza every day, according to the UN. The ceasefire deal, however, would allow 600 aid trucks to enter Gaza each day, but only 39% of the allocated trucks are reaching their destinations today, according to the government media office. The UN has reported that many children, as much as 30,000 children in Gaza, have been affected by this storm damage that another speaker has referred to, and they're in their shelters, or their makeshift shelters, while Israel continues blocking essential winter supplies. Now, the most important part of my intervention is the Israeli strategy. Why Israel feels authorized to continue the violations, why it continues to violate this ceasefire agreement. Number one, countries such as Germany and the United States and others have enabled this. Why is this? We're asking ourselves. Well, Germany announced on November 17th that it would lift restrictions on arms exports to Israel, citing what it called a stabilized ceasefire in Gaza. But Germany, by continuing to provide Israel with arms as Israel continues to attack Gaza, violating the ceasefire, thus makes the violation of the ceasefire legitimate. And the US and other countries, which supply most of Israelis' arms and provides it with unbridled support, while Israel continues again to violate the ceasefire, also legitimizes Israel's attacks, its violations of the ceasefire. What is this Israeli strategy, however? One of the most important strategies is to fabricate false reasons to attack Gaza during the ceasefire, therefore setting up a failure of the ceasefire, or almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. What do I mean by that? Israel alleges it is attacking Gaza after the ceasefire agreement due to some explosives going off, or gunfire, or pursuing Hamas, or claiming Hamas is preparing to attack, none of which there is evidence. Or when first Hamas did not return captive bodies fast enough, remember that? Israel claimed it bombed Gaza to pressure Hamas. But this shows bad faith. Severe bad faith, because at first Israel prevented the machinery to enter to help remove the rubble to find the bodies. It shows clearly there was no desire. That is not really an important criteria for Israel. It's just another way of Israel to fabricate false reasons to attack Gaza, or to prevent Hamas from complying with the ceasefire agreement, setting up the failure of the ceasefire agreement. Israel thus sets up this, what I call self-fulfilling prophecy, that the ceasefire is violated, again, if Hamas can't find the bodies or is prevented from doing so. Also, Israel traditionally violates ceasefires. For example, it has been bombing southern Lebanon since the ceasefire was signed between it and the Lebanese government. On March 16th, for example, it killed 4 people in 2 villages. The above strategies, I'd like to emphasize, used by Israel to violate the ceasefire, make it clear that Israel never intended to comply with the ceasefire, and will again only do so if forced to do so. And I'm in conclusion, Israel, by not complying with the ceasefire, manifests again its desire to maintain complete control of Gaza with the aid of the US and other countries. And finally, this conforms with Israel's overall policy in the region to extend its control and borders in the region at all costs. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Mr. Romano. Now we give the floor to Rabbi Israel David Weiss, American anti-Zionist activist, rabbi, and spokesman for the worldwide religious group Neturai Karta. Rabbi Israel? Can you? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. Yes, now you have the floor.
Yeah. So First, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me his truth, his wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying his message and so sanctify his name and bring peace to the world. I really humbled and appreciative of being invited to this extremely critical assembly, which the goal obviously is to somehow open the minds, change the approach of what the world is doing in regard to the occupation in the horrific occupation in Palestine and certainly now in Gaza. I just brought to mind when Richard Falk was speaking, where he mentioned about that although there's a ceasefire, we are standing in a situation where it is turned to the frigid winter, and people are simply dying from the cold. And it reminded me of a story that we in Jewish teaching, that it's very important part of our true Judaism, is that we have to constantly think and worry and be concerned with the poor. So there was a rabbi at the beginning of winter went out on the streets to collect money, went from door to door, which is common in our communities, to collect money for the poor. They need to be able to make the fires and so forth, to warm the homes. So he went to the door of a rich man and he knocked on the door. Somebody came out to the door and they saw it's the rabbi of the city. So the rich man came to the door himself and he said, "Come on in, come on in." And he said, "I just have to speak to you a moment. If you, I don't want to come in. I just have to speak a moment." And he started talking about the situation of the poor people, and he like moved a little back from the door, so the rich man had to come out a little bit into the outside there in the street. And he starts talking to him, and the rich man was not wearing his coat, and he started shaking from cold. And the rabbi just keeps on continuing. He said, "Just one more minute," and he starts talking to him and talking and explaining the situation. Finally, the guy said, "Look, I'm freezing cold. Come on in." So he said to him, "I just wanted you to stand here and appreciate what we're dealing with over here, that you have a nice warm home to go into while other people don't. I could say it to you in your home, but you won't appreciate it. It won't get into your heart. We are dealing with another phase of the evil of the satanic occupation of Palestine. It is no less than the bombing, what they're doing by killing people, totally psychologically destroying them by minute. It rains and they're flooded and it's freezing cold just for a minute to stand in such a situation. And it brings death and it brings a lifetime of suffering and who knows how many sicknesses that will escort them through their lives. We can't, it's beyond words that the world is silent in such a situation. Unfortunately, the cover, the excuse is that they have it was by way that the Zionists have dehumanized the people of Palestine, the people of Gaza, and that is their modus operandi, that they make as if they constantly speak, for instance, of October 7th, and now we've just witnessed in Australia where the Prime Minister Netanyahu openly rebuked Australia and said that they are at fault because of their position of recognizing Palestine. The hubris, the ultimate chutzpah, the audacity, not even being embarrassed at the fact because of what they're doing is inciting and bringing hate. We're not, of course, saying that there is a right to go and shoot civilians and shoot people. God forbid, that's not the issue. But to totally free himself of responsibility, the fact that for 2 years they're murdering innocent children and on, torturing, arresting doctors, the heads of hospitals and letting and torturing to death, and on and on and on, and then to feel that they're totally not responsible for a reaction of somebody who cannot witness this thing, and then to blame it because the prime minister looks at the humanity and the needs of a human people. And it's beyond words. Now, that the problem isn't that what he did, because he's the core of this of the satanic movement that is doing this. But where is the world? It's an insult. It really an insult to humanity that we are standing by over 2 years of Gaza, but not of Gaza, of Palestine for 77 years. When we as Jewish people in the Jewish community in Palestine have been pleading from day one in 1947, that is 78 years before the state was ratified, the chief rabbi of the Jewish community of Palestine, the community that was living in harmony together with Muslims and Christians, pleaded with the delegation of the United Nations. It's the United Nations documents where he stated, Rabbi Yosef Tzvi in July 16, 1947, he said, "We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine." He wasn't lacking in his Jewishness, in his God-fearingness, and what that was. But this is the position. After he passed on, the tens of thousands came to bring up another rabbi there. This is the Jewish community that is true to our religion, that has been that is being attempted to be co-opted by a political movement called Zionism. Judaism is to serve God. It is a bogus Judaism when you take that our religion of being subservient to God, emulating God, not to kill, not to steal, to do charity, to live in friendship, to live in appreciation and gratitude to the people, the Muslim people of the Ottoman Empire, of all the Arab and Muslim worlds who took the Jews in when we were being harassed in Europe. We were accepted. And with our distinctly different religion, we flourished in every Arab and Muslim lands without any human rights groups to protect us. This is not a conflict of religion. It is totally not a conflict of religion. It has absolutely nothing to do with it. It is a new movement, not a religion of Judaism, which is over 3,000 years. It's a movement of 140 years or so of a nationalist movement of a group of people who created something called Zionism. That is a transformation from this religion of Judaism into a base concept of a material concept of nationalism. And they have taken the reins and tried to speak in the name of a religion and commit atrocities beyond human comprehension, where they've taken all the reporters of the world and warned them that they'll be shot if they come into the area of the conflict, so you can't witness it. They take the doctors who are trying to save the people who are sick and dying, and they are openly arresting and torturing them. The chief of the hospital, a doctor, is languishing and dying under their prison camps. This is beyond comprehension that the world should be silenced. We've had apartheid as an example in our days, where you had tens of years with the United Nations accepted and bona fide the existence of South Africa under apartheid rule. Whoever spoke up was labeled a terrorist. It turned around because of people like all you distinguished people who are here, and the people of the streets, the humanity that stood up and said, we are like mosquitoes to the politicians. We won't let you rest. Finally, the politicians had no choice but to stand up in opposition to apartheid. And now today, once it was removed, nobody would dare try to create a country under apartheid rule, because they'll be laughed out of humanity, of human society, because it's crazy, because it's so inhumane. How could you do such a thing? Israel is inhumane. It's not, and it's a bogus. It's not a religion. When you face the open truth that invariably the most religious communities around the world, from the streets of Jerusalem and Al-Quds, Mea She'arim, to the streets of New York, wherever it is, the most religious community is invariably anti-Zionist. When you're coming to New York, right across from Manhattan, it's the largest concentration of religious communities is Brooklyn, New York, Williamsburg, Brooklyn, where there's not one single Israeli flag flying in a community that gives their lives for the religion. Everybody does not use the public school system, which is free. And they have families of average 7 children because we don't permit family planning. So you have large families and everybody pays for private education. And if it would be critical to have Zionism or would be beneficial for the Judaism, they would be the first to support it. Yet they're all entirely in opposition to the existence of a so-called Jewish state in Palestine and Jerusalem. Why? It must be that something is wrong in the world comprehension of what the issue is. It's not Judaism versus Islam. It's not a conflict of religions. What we witnessed in Australia was purely because of the incitement of the oppression of a people in Palestine, and Jews are paying for this. We as Jews around the world are suffering and are the victims of the world conflating Judaism with Zionism. People hate us because of the actions of Zionism. Nobody would have believed that in New York, Mamdani could win the elections. See, why did that happen? Because with all the power of the media and the pressure of the politicians, they fell through because humanity spoke. Why did the humanity speak? Because it's bogus, this Judaism, and it's an insult, as I say, to base common sense, what we are witnessing here. People are not opposed to Jews. The people of Palestine, the people of Gaza are beautiful, innocent people. And they're suffering not because they have opposition to Jews or they're anti-Semites. The anti-Semites is a creation of the Zionist state of Israel. They are the epitome, the textbook explanation of anti-Semitism, because they've driven a rift between Jews and Muslims. They've created a monster out of Judaism. And it is unacceptable, and whoever conflates the two should be sued because of character defamation, because what they're doing to my Judaism. My grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. We suffered because we were Jews. Yes, we were ready to die because we were Jews. When the Nazis came, they wanted to kill every Jew because they're not Aryan. That is anti-Semitism. When you're dealing with a movement that just because they want to occupy some other people and cover that with claiming because the people hate them because they're anti-Semitic, those are anti-Semites. They are creating hate. They are killing people. Maybe 100,000 Palestinians have been killed now. Jews are dying from the ones who are in support of the Zionism, are dying because of their false comprehension of what Judaism, and Jews who oppose them are being brutally beaten. We don't carry any arms, we don't carry any weapons, yet they're daily beaten because they stand peacefully demonstrating in the streets of Jerusalem. Old men, young children, they get arrested because they refuse to serve in the Israeli army, and nobody says a word. This is unacceptable, and the world has to stop being intimidated by the accusation of anti-Semitism and realize that this is a charade. It is totally openly false Judaism. It is a nationalism. Please let us clearly. Let's just say Judaism is over 3,000 years to be subservient to God. We were under oath of God since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, not to kill, not to steal. We're not allowed to reestablish any Jewish sovereignty, even in an empty land. Certainly not in a land that was inhabited, and certainly not by killing or stealing. And we have to also show appreciation for people who did good to us, which was the Muslims, which was the Ottoman Empire, which was the people of Palestine now. So this is something that is clearly unacceptable, and the rabbis around the world, the very religious community, always oppose this. We have to integrate this knowledge into to the fight against
Rabbi
the
Weiss.
world silence. We have to, yeah, finishing with this, we have to clearly bring this to the front that we are dealing with a corrupt, selfish, flawed occupation that has absolutely no justification in the word justice. So please let us do something about it when we still can, when there's somebody to save. We're pleading with people. Let us somehow get the world that they should not be silenced, the politicians and so forth. They must stand up and hear the voice of the constituents, of the people that are saying we are openly witnessing destruction of humanity that is unjust, that is satanic.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Weiss, for this insightful word. And now we move to Mr. Buka Ngesa Omole, Kenyan political activist. Booker, are you there?
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you for being with us. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to reinforce the messages that have been given in this forum and bring out the perspective from the African continent in solidarity with the Palestinian people. And also acknowledge that the African population and the Palestinian population have a lot of commonalities. There is a shared struggle of colonialism that each and every African person who understands the pain of colonialism, of settler colonialism, shares verily in the struggle of the Palestinian people. The second point that I also wanted to bring out is to echo the message that has been given by Rabbi. Because when I was a young man, growing up in the rural area, the Zionist project continues to deceive the African people that the war that is taking place in Palestine is an interreligious war, that it is Christian and Muslims that are fighting only for various religious sites, even though there is certain extent of truth. But for us in the African continent, now we understand even with more clarity that the occupied Palestine is indeed a settler colonial project, where the Palestinian people who have been displaced are called the terrorists. The Palestinians that continue to be massacred are called the murderers. And this has been effective through mainly the endless use of corporate propaganda. The third point that I wanted to bring through is the deception in terms of the foreign policy of imperialism, particularly the Zionist regime that continued to slaughter the Palestinian people. That even though they supported what they are calling the ceasefire, but we cannot trust Zionism. We cannot trust the United States in terms of foreign policy because they pursue a policy of deception. This ceasefire that is currently underway, we have correctly analyzed it, that what the Zionist regime was interested in, supported by the United States and the capitalist Western bloc, the British, the French, and all their Western junior partners, was never to support a ceasefire, but it was temporary pauses to only ensure that the captives could be released, but they were never, in truth, that they want a return of peace, justice, and a sovereign Palestinian Republic. Because after the ceasefire, the Trump administration has continued to advance only the colonial logic of occupying the Palestinian territory. We have seen even the heavy machinery that is meant to rebuild Gaza has been prevented from reaching there. So we have seen the Palestinian children using their bare hands to make sure that they can have shelter. This is not just about Netanyahu's inhumane behavior, because Netanyahu does not act in isolation. This is the crisis that has been caused by the United States imperialism by forcing itself an extension to advance its influence in West of Asia. The Palestinian occupied territory by Zionism is not just about the Israel project. It is about making sure that the United States of America's dominance class assert itself, that there will be no peace unless that peace sustains United States influence and its interest in the West of Asia. So when we are analyzing the ceasefire and how the ruling class in the occupied territory of Palestine advances its activities from Gaza to Khan Yunis and the daily slaughter of the Palestinian people, it is indeed an experiment that they think they can achieve because they achieved it with the Red Indians in North America, murdered the entire local population, occupied the North, and declared it the United States of America, and now they dominate it. Where were the people there? They were all massacred. Look at Australia, what settler colonialism did. And this is the experiment that they think that they cannot learn from history, that they can repeat it in the occupied territory of the Palestinian people. I know for a fact that there's been a talk of a two-state solution, a one-state solution, but which Palestinian state? While the ruling Zionist regime are not interested to have a Palestinian state sovereign and independent with its own military, Gaza has been under siege for a long time. In fact, to be truthful about it, Gaza has been an open-air prison. And the dictates of the Zionism within Gaza, who now pretends to hate Hamas, who now pretends that they need a pro-democratic, government to govern Gaza, have no interest to have a government that is sane in Gaza. In fact, they want to drive the entire Palestinian, population to the deserts in Egypt. They want to make sure that the Palestinian population can leave their own homeland by staying in as refugees in other countries. This is the hypocrisy of Zionism supported by the United States dominance class. And we must bring that out clearly, because we cannot analyze the occupation in Palestine without the arms flowing from the British government, from the Western Europe, from United States. Zionism will not stand on its shoulders. In fact, it's only the defiance of the Iranian people that have stood against the arrogance of the United States imperialism, that for a fact has been able to actually put a stoppage in the United States offensive in the current West of Asia. I would like to say verily that from the Kenya-Palestine Solidarity movement, the Communist Party and all the progressive in the African continent stand shoulder to shoulder with our brothers and sisters in Palestine. And we say that Palestine is the weakest link of the United States imperialism. And the strategic decline of the United States also advances the freedom of the Palestinian people. We must, for a fact, those who have suffered under the yoke of colonialism and now imperialism, standing shoulder to shoulder to make sure that the Palestinian project, in fact, even in a more radical way, to say that there is an essence need for a one-state solution where the Arabs, the Jew, the black population, the white population can live and coexist peacefully under democratic government, where all democratic rights are respected. This is our distant dream as we support the Palestinian people. And we support them unconditionally. We know for a fact that we should be able to join them to fight Zionism with arms, to make sure that we are able to bring dignity to the planet. But we are far away. Probably we can send medicine. We can send solidarity to the Palestinian people. But verily, the victory is with the oppressed. And we will say that the Palestinian people will be the victors. And the Zionist project will be humiliated, and their partners, which are mainly the United States imperialism. I like the way the British politicians have put it in this forum, that even the British politicians themselves cannot make a decisions of their own. In fact, British themselves, in our own analysis, is a neocolony. They take the dictates of the United States dominance class to make sure that they can draft and craft the foreign policy, not just towards the African continent, but towards the peripheral countries. So this is unacceptable, that even the politicians that are in Western Europe cannot read the mood of the people, that they stand out to only speak for themselves, but the entire European population, in fact, the majority of them, supports the Palestinian project. Now, it is pathetic that even the free speech in Europe is being curtailed in the essence to protect a genocide that is currently unfolding in our very eyes. We will say that such people will only be judged by history, and the Palestinian people will indeed be free. Thank you very much, my comrades.
Thank you very much, Mr. Booker. And now we move for Alicia Solis. And sorry for keeping you waiting that long. And now you have the floor.
No, that's perfectly all right. This is an important conversation with a lot of voices. So I'm very pleased and honored that you've invited me to join these folks today. So I want to start off with the fact that the UN had reported in 2012 that if the conditions in Gaza did not improve by 2020, that the area would be considered uninhabitable. Now, that report, again, came out in 2012, and that was before the current genocide began. So looking at the area now, we can see that, that the amount of destruction and death that has taken place is just astronomical. Probably, I would venture to say that that's probably more than most of us have witnessed and seen in our lifetime. In Amnesty International's report in 2022, they designated the Israeli state as an apartheid state. And something that was published within that report, going back to Gaza specifically, was the amount of aid that was being allowed in. The Israeli government was using mathematical formulas to dictate how much aid was coming in. So what they were doing was they determined how much food an individual needs to survive, not to live and to thrive, but just barely to survive. Multiply that by the amount of people that were currently living in Gaza, and that's the amount of food aid that was going in. So the conditions in Gaza were already, there was already a humanitarian crisis that was happening prior to October 7th. But I think one thing that a lot of people are now learning that people didn't understand before, I think most people on this call and our colleagues understood that October 7th was not the beginning of something, but a reaction to something. And of course, that doesn't justify violence in any means, but the oppression that the Zionist Israeli government has been putting on both the populations of Gaza and in the occupied West Bank have been just crippling to the societies within them. And if you look at the death tolls since October 7th, and I want to be clear that it was definitely a tragedy. There were lives lost on both sides, innocent lives. And even if we focus a lot on the number of civilians that have been killed, but even a soldier, we know that a soldier, that's a career for them. That's something that they choose. But at the end of the day, that's still somebody's child. So even people that are within the military, you know, a loss of life is a loss of life. But if you look at the numbers, we're looking at the Palestinians at over 70,000 people have been killed since the genocide began, now over 2 years ago. Only about 2,000 Israelis have died since the conflict began. So it's a very uneven and unbalanced warfare. And it's basically being viewed as collective punishment because we're saying, or the Israeli government will say it's Hamas, 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 but they're targeting places of refuge, refugee camps, most specifically, hospitals, schools, mosques, churches. A lot of people I know here in the United States don't understand that when we talk about Palestine, that's not just a Muslim population. That's a Christian population as well. That's the birthplace of Christ. The cities of Bethlehem, Jerusalem, Nazareth, Jericho. Those are all come from the Bible stories that Christians grew up with listening to as children and now read as adults. So a lot of people are not aware of the fact that this is targeting Christian communities as well. So I find it very ironic that some of our politicians here in the United States, not only ironic, but very disappointing that they talk about having Christian values, but they're not in the market of saving Christian lives, especially in both Gaza and in the occupied West Bank. But also, a lot of the people that have been targeted are also, it's not soldiers that are dying on a battlefield. The vast majority of the people that have been killed in Gaza are actually civilians. Almost 250 journalists have been killed. Over 100 academics have been killed, over 200 humanitarian aid workers, and almost 200 UNRWA workers from the UN. So these are not people that signed up to defend their country on a battlefield. They are coming to report on what's happening or to provide humanitarian aid for a place that is now so desperately in need of it. What I think needs to happen is, especially here in the United States, is number one, education. Like I said, there's a lot of things that Americans don't know and didn't know prior to October 7th. But it is so unfortunate that it has to happen at the cost of losing so many innocent civilian lives, especially children. That's another issue. It's over 20,000 children that have been murdered during this genocide also. And the ones that have been left alive, a vast majority of them have been orphaned. So again, this is not balanced warfare on any scale. But what we need to do is continue to educate our communities, to go out and let them know the truth about what is happening. Thanks to social media, I think we are able to get the information from the people that are experiencing the genocide and the apartheid and the violence. We're able to get information from them as it's happening and as it unfolds in real time. We don't, today, we don't have to rely on the news and what they decide we should or should not know. We're getting the information from those people that are there and are being immediately affected. So then with that education and starting to learn what's happening, then we need to turn to advocacy work. We need to be in the offices of our elected officials, our members of Congress, to let them know that we're not supporting this. This is not okay. This is not how we want to be represented on a global stage. Our tax dollars, Israel was receiving $3.8 billion prior to the genocide. And they're using that, and the excuse is, everything that they're getting and the actions that they take. This is in the case of security for the Israeli people. How do you get $3.8 billion from one of the strongest countries in the world with the most advanced technology, and you can't get your house in order, and there's still all of this violence? And like the rabbi said, this is creating an issue for the Jewish community that are not Zionists, that stand in solidarity with the Christians and the Muslims that are there in Palestine. I don't understand how he continues, the Netanyahu and the rest of the Israeli government that is perpetuating this violence, how they don't understand that is directly affecting their communities, not only there, but overseas. the person that, if this is if it was reported correctly, the person that did the mass shooting in Australia, it was reported that he was a former IDF soldier, and he said that he was tired of the way that his people were acting. So this is a Jewish man attacking other Jews for what he doesn't understand the representation. You know, they're not Zionists. They're not the ones that are being oppressive to the people in the Gaza Strip and in the occupied West Bank. But he took out his anger on those people. So it's misrepresented. So the what he's accomplishing, or what he thinks he's going to accomplish, is nothing. You know, what are you going to do when everybody's dead? Because that's what's basically going to happen if they don't let up. So again, I think it's very important for us to speak to our elected officials. I've been in this space for just over 10 years, and if somebody within the U.S. government would speak out on Palestine, it would be political suicide. The Israeli lobby here in the United States is just disgustingly in control of our politicians. And it's shameful that the politicians are looking to take money over people's lives. But that's, at the end of the day, that is what's happening. But a lot of our politicians, they too are starting to understand what's happening. They are starting to understand where our tax dollars are going and how it's being used, and they're not on board with it. So we as a community need to continue to have those conversations with our elected officials and let them know, if they're not willing to be on the right side of history, we will vote them out and put somebody else in that will. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia, very much. Now we move to the final speaker of today, Mr. Gakuna Njiba Castro, Kenyan writer and political analyst. Mr. Castro. Hello. We apologize for keeping you waiting that long. So now you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me this evening. Actually, I have been listening all through, and thanks for having me in this panel for this forum. And I have listened all through, and I can digest that so many people are not happy with whatever is happening between Israel and Gaza. And Gaza being a small state, or Palestine being a small state within maybe whatever Israel may perceive a state, within a state, those people, they need to be protected, covered, of course, because whatever interest Netanyahu has on Gaza, it's not very clear whatever interest that he may be having, whether he wants a one state or a two states. He is not of course, giving even the information that is given to the public, it's not an information that we can fully digest, that we have clear interests of what Israel wants into Palestine. And this war having continued for 2 years and only halted or ceasefire 2 weeks or 2 months ago. And this ceasefire, of course, it's very fragile, because we have reported cases of, or incidences of sporadic incidences and military actions and accusation of violations that, of course, are frequently between or reported by both Israeli and Hamas. So it's a case that is not really taken care of with the proceedings of the current occasions. And of course, even the Palestinian people living, or those living in Gaza, experiencing very harsh climate change at this time. You will hear, of course, and also getting some reports of houses or buildings that are, of course, collapsing because of the weather, because of the rain, some floodings. And Israeli is not ceasing fire as directed or given by both parties. It is something that is very disappointing, because that is not only a disregard to humanity, but also a disregard to human life, and also right to life. It is very threatening and very risky, especially for Palestinian women and children experiencing that that kind of all harsh political, military, and climate changes at such kind of a time. So when I listened to Rabbi, Labi gave the context of, because I came from that, the 25th, I had movement, the Palestinian movement. I didn't get the name very clear. And I heard him speak emotionally about the feelings and the context of the Palestinian people at this time and how they came from and where they are. And I can admit that such kind of a feeling on he's inviting all the people of the world to rise up, of course, and support Palestinian and halt against Israeli dishumanity or Israeli purge against Palestinian humans. So it is something that we are called to, and I'm glad that people of the world, of course, they are rising against Israeli. We only need some powerful, of course, regimes and to support in this cause, because this issue of course, the protocols that have been deployed without any measures that it's put in place, or any enforcement that is put in place, may not didn't necessarily work, because you might find like Israel may not cease fire because it still wants to have a control of whatever is happening between the parties. It might want to have the control also of the land or the Palestinian people. And you can you also are getting the reports of how also the humanitarian aid or humanitarian assistance is not getting to the Palestinian people, the Gaza people. And you see that interference of Israeli with the flow or free flow of humanitarian aid, the food, the health services, that interference should not be there, because it is part of the ceasefire. But Netanyahu want to tilt the balance of ceasefire into his advantage, because at such kind of a time when the people are tired, the people of Palestinian, of course, they are trying now to come together, get some warmth. Of course, they get experiencing the harsh climate change, and the government's trying now to get to their people now and plan the building. Whether that measures would come, and Netanyahu would not allow such kind of reorganization again. So that's why he's keeping on poking and poking, because the person or the people, the world, maybe the United Nations, the organization that should come in to seize this fire and communicate and also negotiate among the people or among the two parties, it's not really performing into that law, because it has been politically influenced or it has been politically interfered with. Such kind of organization are nowadays serving the government instead of serving the people. So the people are left on their own. And such kind of a government who provide resources, who want to provide resources, and of course also negotiate between the two parties, warring parties, and of course whatever they are negotiating, or whoever they are negotiating is has an interest or has an upper hand. It is perceived Israeli and United States. You cannot symbolically, or they cannot be they are one and the same thing. That is the public perception that Israeli is US and US is Israeli. So that perception created among the people and among the nation might not come up with a better negotiation. That's why Israel may fight that it has an upper hand. But what is really happening with the United Nations, who should come and now into the in between the two warring parties as the relationship builder, as the negotiator, and of course now being supported by the political class, because it is not enough to say that this pattern of war between Gaza and Israeli will come to an end, because at such kind of a time when that fragile ceasefire or it's happened, whatever it's happening, it might be, of course, it will be said that in the near future, the coin might tilt towards Israeli, and Israeli may find it has an upper hand, and of course now maybe want to continue with the fight, of course, with the agenda of what they want. So it is upon the actors, non-state actors, to get in between the people and listen to the people, of course, and get the perception or get the interest between Israeli and also between Palestine. And if they do, then they are sleeping on their job, because they should be the people who should be, of course, between, or who should be the mediators of the warring parties between among state. And this is happening even among most peoples, or among communities and the countries, such kind of whatever is happening in Sudan and now in Gaza, Israel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Castro, for your input. And now, at the end of this valuable webinar, I'd like to thank everyone who has taken part in it, either by speaking, commenting, or listening. Thank you very much for your precious time and these helpful insights, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's the great. We hope the message gets to the people of Gaza, Palestine, that they should know our hearts are with them, and that we are hurting with them and praying to the Almighty for them.
Inshallah. Thank you very much for your feelings.
Thank you.
I put the reports that I referenced, I put them in the chat if you're interested in sharing those out.
Sure.
Okay. Well, thank you again for having me on the panel. I do appreciate the time. Oh yeah, of course, anytime.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
And call us anytime with God's help. We'd love to join and be physically there. The world should become more aware and educated and be able to stand up without any fear. So we travel the world and always willing to travel the world. Hopefully, till God, with His compassion, brings an end of this occupation.
Thank you very much. May God bless you.
Thank you.
خلود